Whenever we watch something historical, a biopic, a period piece, even just an old movie, we're engaging with history. More often than not, this engagement is focused on historical accuracy. Did Scots really use kilts in the 13th century? Was this person really here? Could this really happen? Noting a historical inaccuracy will affect the credibility of a story, thus resulting in a lack of immersion. This results in a loss of focus, especially on the reasons why the story was told in the first place. Isn't it much more important to focus on why some parties choose to spend millions of dollars on certain history rather than note the usage of a wrong flag? While understanding historical accuracy is an important part of media literacy, for example to understand and differentiate propaganda, many historical film theorists argue that in storytelling, it's much more important to explore how and especially why the stories engage with history. Understanding the why and the how shows us the reason history is used in society and storytelling. Why is this even important? I'll answer that, but first, let's look at how we engage with history. Like I said, every time we look at something historical, we're engaging with it. It can be a film, a book, even a photo from our childhood. This engagement happens from a historically specific time point. For example, watching a photo of yourself 2 days ago has 2 time points. Today, the moment of watching, and 2 days ago, the time of the photo. If something life-changing happens between those 2 days, for example, a breakup, the photo changes. You remember how happy you were, how much you felt love. The more time passes, the more the photo changes. But remember, only in nuance, in tint, in emotions. If you were asked to create the photo again after a month, the photo would be different. In a year, even more different. In 10, completely different. It might have perspective, but is it realistic? Most likely not, since your emotions change the memory. This doesn't mean history itself can't have objective qualities. It means that emotions are never objective. Watching a film about history has a similar arc. There's the time point of the production of the film and the time point which the film depicts. To make matters more complicated, we can watch a movie about the past from the past, giving us 3 time points. Between all of these, we have emotions, science, perspective, sociology, in short, all of the history. Now it's more than evident that the time past has changed the memory. I won't argue on the quality of the change, I'll only say that the change happens. Thus, historical films are interpretations of history made at a historically specific time. They are concerned with the past, but their perspective is that of the present, and as such, they represent both. So now we've established how films engage with history, we have time points, emotions between them, etc. Let's look at why films engage with history. A lot of film theorists used to argue that the ultimate goal of cinema is complete realism. But as we know, that's not how films nowadays really are. They're not reality, they mimic it. Movie cameras are way more detailed than the human eye, so arguably they are more real than our own vision. And in a film theater, we hear bombs explode more realistically than most people ever experience. Also, filmmakers use film language to influence the way pictures and sounds are perceived. Thankfully, audiences are media literate, so we're used to this, but sometimes movies succeed in the tricks they do, and they reach our emotions. Because of media literacy, the gimmicks of movie cameras and sound editing don't reach realism anymore. But through emotions, we welcome a new kind of realism, an emotional realism. A feeling felt from a film is very similar to the real deal. Of course, they're fundamentally different, but at its best, it's a powerful mirage, an illusion of emotional reality. This emotional realism is what makes films unique, since it doesn't happen in other mediums on a mass scale. In a historical movie, audiences are influenced by emotions in a historical setting. This means that in historical films, the relationship between the present and the past is, by definition, accented with emotion. The movie breathes feeling into the history. All of a sudden, what does it matter if this battle never happened? Isn't it much more important to ask the question, why is the production trying to create an emotional link to this time period? What type of emotional link is it trying to create? Is it trying to redeem a character? To lionize a person? To warn us? To resonate with a certain generation? Questions like this are usually much more important than historical inaccuracies, since they don't turn us away from the movie. On the contrary, it makes us more involved in them. Historical movies cost a lot of money to make, like a lot of money, and usually they have politics involved, large organizations involved, major people of power involved. If we focus on historical inaccuracy, we stop looking at the reasons why the production is made. A critical audience is always beneficial since it forces the productions to be more carefully and thoughtfully produced. In short, it makes them better. I'm not saying we should never focus on historical inaccuracies. Sometimes it can be beneficial for understanding why history is used. For example, in Braveheart, Understanding that Scots use kilts not because they actually wore kilts at the time, but because it gives a visual separation of the Scots and the English. This drives a stronger sense of national pride in modern viewers, which in the 90s was important because there was a growing movement of Scottish devolution. Understanding the historical inaccuracy of kilts helps understand some of the effects of the film. So like I said, historical inaccuracies should be focused on, but not too much. The discourse of historical stories is often clouded by historical accuracy, which is misleading and deviates from the actual point that some parties of power have decided to use history, and specifically to use emotions to make an audience feel some way about some time period. Every time we engage with history, it has an effect only in the present. Using history to create emotions in the present results in change in the present. So instead of focusing on historical accuracy, we should focus more on the reasons why history is used, focus on the emotions that the stories are trying to induce. This might just be the difference between a good cinematic change and a bad one. Or maybe it's just a fragment. Thanks for watching. What do you think of the importance of historical accuracy? Also, I'm always working on something involving movies and emotions. Subscribe to hear all about it.